Thanks for joining us. This is live with My Music Community News, and our guest is Javier Banos.
Thank you very much,
CPA, an attorney, which is still a big whiz to us normal people, all right, and former candidate for the City of Coral Gables Commission. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming back. And so here we are, pretty much post-pandemic for most people.
I would say.
And people are just so happy, and they're happy to be out. Their families are closer. The state and the country is opening up very much.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get on to Coral Gables, I was at a horse country meeting the other day.
Sure.
We haven't had a meeting since last February. First time ever, there were over 60 people there at a meeting, right, of concerned citizens and some folks from the county. And we asked what has happened in the last year. And they said, well, it's all this pent up frustration about issues that are going on. And so now people are out rebel rousing, and they want the powers to be. We may have been sleeping for a while, but we're back in action.
Right. It's created a crescendo of activism, right? And so, and I think you'll see that throughout the county, specifically, at least for my concerns in the city of Coral Gables. We're used to thinking of the Gables of this posh, quiet place in which nothing happens, right? Well, certainly that has not been the case. It certainly wasn't the case during the election, and we continue to have the same level of activism and engagement that we've seen happen in the past. So, the commission, the new commission, I think, started in the wrong footing. Which is no judgment on the two elected commissioners, which I think Rhonda Anderson is doing a superb job as commissioner, and the mayor is getting.
And she was very popular. She had a lot of support.
Surprisingly, because she had a 6-way race, right? She almost got as many votes as the mayor got, in his own race, and she got him twice. It is. Love her or hate her, but she definitely did her work and went out there and talked to residents and won the trust and the commitment of her fellow citizens. So I commend her greatly. I think she did a superb job in her campaign, and she's really started working very hard to essentially do something politicians sometimes don't do, which is to do what they said they were going to do. So you have to commend her on that. But the first controversy and the first issue that came up to the commission was this 350 Greco Avenue property, and I know you guys have made comments on that, and
yes.
And as well as Gables Insiders and other places. And I think part of what's happened is there really needs to be a paradigm shift within the commission. We really need to rethink the way we do governing, which is not to say that that there's no professionalism within the city. I mean, I've talked to those folks. I see what they do. I'm now a part of the budget advisory board, so I had a sense of how they manage it. It's a pretty professional run city. But there's the paradigm shift to be in which we have citizen engagement come in, and we don't, and the citizens don't feel and don't behave like, when the city doesn't behave like it's an inside game, that they know what they're doing. Let the residents be out of the picture. Let us run the government and don't bother us, which I think seems to be a lot of the attitude that comes from, which is one of the things that was said. Trust us. We know what we're doing. On a hearing that happened on Monday, in which we had about 100 people show up to the actual to the actual building.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. 100 folks, and then we had another 200 and so plus folks on the Zoom meeting. So there were phases there have never been engaged, over 300 people, because the issues are present. It's not just the issue of development, but it's the issue of engagement, of making sure that we have a government that represents us. And I think 350 Greco Avenue and some of the other projects that are coming into the city have left a bad taste in the mouth of residents.
So let's look at how people can participate in government as never before.
Right.
Even though Zoom had been there before, people found out it was an acceptable way to attend, right? Without having to go. So in this case, there were like 400 people or so that were involved in that, which is tremendous. And I think people want to be engaged. People want to know that somebody's listening. We all want people to agree with us, but what's most important is you get to be heard, and you get to listen to other people's positions.
Look, technology can be a great equalizer, right? It can have its drawbacks. Now we have Facebook, in which all opinions are equally valid, or some are good enough. So you get the good and the bad with it. But it has allowed for better engagement of the citizenry within the system. So in other words, the public sphere, the exchange of ideas now has been democratized to a higher degree. So you just don't have the center of all the activity being the commission chambers. Now you have an ability for people to actually engage. But things that have happened that I think are important. First, the commission meetings, one of them will actually happen at night. Okay. We'll start, I believe it was 5 o'clock, 4:30, and then the actual meetings or issues that are germane or of importance to residents will have a time certain to be heard after 6 o'clock. And I think that's key.
When did that start?
More or less. That was voted on, I think, the second meeting in May. So that was.
And prior to that, when were those meetings?
9 o'clock. Okay.
9 o'clock, not PM.
9 a.m.
I mean, when people are like,
you and I are used to the city of South Miami meetings that start at 7 o'clock and end at 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And so Cora Gables would do the meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning. Very people would show up. Maybe Maria Cruz would show up, but not. And they have learned through Zoom that there's a lot more engagement that's required. So now they have moved at least one of those two meetings a night. And I think that's going to bring more folks in. There's going to be more, there's going to be more engagement of the residents on what the commission is doing.
And I think I think that is an important plus for the commissioners there to say we are open and we're going to allow this to be transparent. We want you to participate, and here are the many avenues.
Yeah, and for example. And the 350 Greco Avenue is such an emblematic way in which the city has run in the past, and the way it shouldn't run, and then we ended up where we should have started. Okay, so you have a situation where you have this property that's city owned that is being sold to somebody who approached the city as a developer, and I really have no. I mean, I don't think city property should be sold. I think it can be leased, and there are all the ways we can reuse a property, because there's an opportunity cost to selling a property you have today, right? You can reuse it in the future. But if the decision is to sell the property, it should be done as an open process, transparent process. It should be sold at the end. If we've done it 20 times in the wrong way in the past, it's still done the wrong way. And if ultimately this particular developer is the best and highest use for the property, and they can provide the best price, and the commission decides that that's what should happen, great. But the problem is that the very inception of the matter, especially when you have one commissioner who worked for the principles of that developer, smacked of insider dealing. It's smacked of poor transparent government. And the fact that they were just running in this train to go ahead and down this route, sort of, especially when you have an election that sort of cried for a different mode of thinking within the commission, I think that is where they failed. That's why it sort of blew up in their face. That's why, they had to go ahead and pay parents situations, so they paid a magazine to try to defend them, because there really it was an indefensible position, and their hands were twisted, and the mayor finally had to vote down the proposition, and now the thing is going through open bid. They're doing it slightly different than what it should be, but there is an invitation for bids to come for the property, and it may or may not be sold to this particular developer. But there's no gun to the commission's head. The city does have reserves, and it has a significant amount of finances. This is not a needed, required capital infusion that the city would needs for any particular purpose. So it's a want, and it should not be done in a hurry, and it should be done in a way that is best for the residents.
So, Javier, we know that as you get older, you realize, okay, this is how we did it last week, last month, last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But at some point, everything evolves, all right? The light bulbs that were made 100 years ago, all right, are not the light bulbs of today. The way people power their houses is not the same way today as it was 20 years ago. And South Miami, for instance, a lot of cities and counties say, listen, you got to start using solar power. So just because we used to do it that way doesn't mean that's the way we're going to do it today or tomorrow.
I completely agree. And look, when you're in an open public sphere, okay, everything is subject to the review of the residents. I mean, the city structure has the residents as sort of the bosses of everybody, right? So if you do it in an open fashion, okay, you do it in a transparent fashion for a city that prides itself on being transparent. Is transparent. The mayor says transparency 1,000 times during every meeting. I think you have to, not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I think that's what you got in the second commission meeting. I think he changed his mind, which I think was a proper way to go about doing it. And applaud him for having taken that step. And I think Commissioner Anderson also supported him in that way because it's
And
important.
what caused this commission to change the way they were going to sell that property?
Oh, you guys and Gables Insider and the outcry from residents and the fact that Leon Kellner called for one of the commissioners to resign because of the way in which in other words, it was an outcry of the public that said to them, guys, you're doing it the wrong way. And it's not a direct democracy; it's a representative democracy. We don't have to do exactly what the populace want because clearly people can disagree. But I think it's pretty clear that the open bid process is the only way you're going to get an understanding of how much this property can be sold for and what the best way to do it. And it's done in a way in which it doesn't smack of the insider trading. And that was what's key. In other words, do it in a public way, do it in a way that makes sense, do it in a way that you can at least let us know for sure that you're doing it for the benefit of the public.
So one of the things that's happened is, as we are all aware, years ago, it would be a couple of radio stations, a couple of TV stations, and there'd be the Miami Herald. And prior to that, the Miami News was working together. And they were the watchdog, all right? The media was the watchdog. They would bring it forth, and then the citizens would find out, and then something might happen. Well, over the years, the Miami Herald's coverage of local content has shifted.
Right.
And it goes to lots of people, whether it's just an internet site or whether it's a blog, but it's the responsibility of the people that are in the media business that share content is to bring it to the people, and then people decide what they want to do. So in this case, the city responded and say, we need to shift this because it's not the right thing. When I was this big, I remember my father saying, if what you do can't pass the Herald sniff test, don't do it. Right?
But I mean, look, ultimately, the Herald's a money-making enterprise, or at least it tries to be, right? So, there are drawbacks to that also being a focus for their perspective. But what I do want to say is, if the fact that we have democratized the engagement with the city, with the assistance of the media to sort of highlight some of his errors, I think it's what's driving this newfound engagement within the city of Coral Gables. I think there's a lot of folks who are committed. I think newly engaged in the process, and I think it's because, which is what we saw on Monday. I think there is a disparity and between what the vision of the city should be, what Merrick had. We don't have to always do what Merrick wanted to do, right? I mean, the guy has been dead for a while, but he had a vision that I think is cherished by the residents. And there is a mode of living and a certain look and a certain feel to the city that we all want to appreciate and love, and we want to accept. And I think Mr. Pardo, which was which is an architect, I believe he's an architect, and also a very engaged resident in the city, and gave a very learned and very smart presentation at the meeting. And he essentially said, look, it's about the way these projects are coming in which we have essentially a bastardized function of what our Mediterranean ordinance is, which is essentially trying to bring in some of those elements that Merrick tried to bring in during the original design of the city by looking at particular buildings and there's that that idea is being bastardized by some of these developers because they're getting such an increasing height by virtue of being able to present this sort of, check these little boxes, that now you're just getting these tall towers, which have not that don't seem to be congruent with the neighborhood itself. Okay. And we're doing this without any infrastructure. I think Huto, who's one of the residents, who gave a very good engagement as to how his perspective on our history and how it had been brought. One of the things he said was, "Look, part of the reissue is there's a significant amount of growth in the county overall, in the city of Miami." And that is spilling over into Coral Gables. And yes, the developers, as the economy would bring, and that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to answer that call, right? They're trying to put in inventory out there for these folks to come in and sell and make money. That's capitalism. But it's being done at the expense of, I think, my perspective, and the expense of the city. And the commission is supposed to be a watchdog for that. And the commission is not a watchdog. The commission is a partner.
So the county is considering changing the zoning on property within a half mile of metro rail stations, half miles around like this. And the proposal, and it's not quite been submitted yet, was they would be in charge of the density that's there, usurping the power of the local entity.
Right.
Then, and I was checking with some folks yesterday, and the county, one of the things being discussed, and the county would get the increased value of that property.
Right.
So let's say it was zoned for 4 stories. The county says it's 12. You can keep the 4 to the cities, but we're going to get the other part. The infrastructure, right, that we're all concerned with is, if these buildings go up, how are we going to be able to move around? What about transportation? What about police? What about fire department? What about the stores? How are we going to be able to move around? And what does it mean in Coral Gables? Obviously, traffic is an issue. It's everywhere. And the more neighborhood there are, people want slower traffic. When these big sites come up, it's a lot harder to handle that. And so I think that the big issues for each of the municipalities, how do we watch out for the big guy that's going to come in, as the state has been doing for the county and for the cities, and how do we protect ourselves, meaning the citizens and the people that care about each of our respective cities. When we look on US 1 in Coral Gables, and we look at the Kraft property over there, it's like I saw some drawings on that. That's massive.
It's immense. Okay, so look, it is about our quality of life. It's about what's going to be like in the future. There's nothing wrong with having a beautiful skyline, okay? But every location is in its place. We're not LA, okay? We're not. They're trying to bring LA to Miami, okay? Because we have that much density coming in, and we're doing that without the proper infrastructure. We're doing that with big fears of sea level rise coming in, in our midterm future of 50, 60 years. So no one is planning for these things. Okay, they're looking at the short term. We're going to build a tower. We're going to sell it. We're going to make money. We're going to keep on going. And the traffic studies and all things are just looked at the macrocosm of the particular project. They're not looking at the broader process. And I mean, it's all done by intention, right? They're looking at the investment coming to the city. Again, our tax base is fine. Okay, we can provide for our city services. We can provide for the level of government we have today. The question is, what is all this investment that they're trying to bring into the city? What is that going to do to our future? And are we going to have the Coral Gables today that we that we want to have as a city?
So let's talk about the west end of Miracle Mile.
Yes.
All the retail stores.
Right.
What's going on there now, and what does the next 6 months to 5 years look like?
Coral Gables and Miracle Mile is not dead. Okay, it has a few places that are empty, but I think their retail there will be modified, will be changed to just meet the same requirements of whatever the residents desire. The other side of the large developments are coming in, so it's just the plaza and everything else, is that you're going to have more people living in the area. Okay? And those places will serve those folks. The design that was approved by the commission essentially takes the mile a little, makes the mile essentially wider because there'll be a little more setback from the street itself. Okay, and then you'll have the mile to be taller. Okay? From what it is today, so it will be a complete change from the way the mile looks today. In the near future, one of the buildings around Tazos came down already. Yeah, and the building that's going there, it's essentially a square box. Nice Mexican restaurant, open. I'm sure somebody found it to be a good design, but it's still a box. Okay, it doesn't have some of the curvatures and the things that make uh, at least the city of Coral Gables, right? So it doesn't all have to look the same way, as I said before, but at the very least have some some organic feel as that is appropriate. So it's like everything else. We'll adjust to what comes because the decision has been made, and we'll try to see what comes into it. But the mile, as we know it today, will not exist in the next 10 years. Yeah. And more than likely, it'll be a much taller structure than what it is today.
And tell us about restaurants and entertainment in the Coral Gables area. For years, the side streets and Miracle Mile were home to some great restaurants. What does that look like?
It's still there. The issue of the pandemic is a lot of those restaurants serve the existing folks that were there, and living in the or working in those towers, and they weren't there for a while. So now that life is coming back into place, I think a lot of that restaurant life will come back into the city. But some of the restaurants died. Okay, they had to leave. Chivo being one of them. Now it has been reimagined in a different fashion, and that will be, and we'll see how that turns out. But like everything else, it's a cyclical process.
Yes. So 6 weeks ago, we held our first breakfast for the public at Casa Cuba in South Miami, and the Mayor Cava, Miami-Dade County Mayor, first woman, was our speaker, and I was wondering how people were going to behave. And so we put on the invitation, please comply with CDC regulations. I don't know what else to do. And it was a full house. And then last week, we had Congressman Carlos Jimenez, our newly elected West Kendall, is a big area, but our former mayor was our speaker. We did it
District 26. Or
yes, and did it at Evelyn Greer Park, a couple hundred people. And you could see people were loosening up, all right? Yeah. And then yesterday at Ana Capri and Pinecrest, the Pinecrest Business Association had their luncheon there, first time ever. When you see that going on and people really want to have face-to-face, you see it. This is pent-up demand.
Right.
And you know how it is with your kids, they want to go out and play, and now we're feeling a lot more comfortable with that. So we anticipate, at least to the restaurants that we go to, that it's going to be picking up. Absolutely. Now, we interviewed the folks from the county, and the garbage pickup people. They already told us that the percentage of garbage in people's houses is down because they're going out to the restaurants. They're not having it brought. Right. And you can see how that's shifting around. Dogs and cats adoptions in the last 15 months have been gigantic because people want to have, pets.
The companion?
Yes. And
I mean, franchise fee, the way you know about it is that the franchise fees are up. Okay, and for the commercial franchises, so the electrical fees, all the garbage for collection fees, and all those things are for most cities. Okay, so as an accounting standpoint, you want to see how commercial activity is working. Just look at the franchise fees. If they move up or down, then you figure out how much is being used. So at least they're up in the city of Coral Gables, and collection is up for those.
That's wonderful. I was speaking to a private company, garbage collector, a few years ago. He says, that restaurant moved from there to there. He says they'd have 4 times more garbage today than they did over there. And you arrive at some conclusions based on that. So it's really neat. Most of us see it. We just see this side. But being that you're a CPA, you get to see that other side of that. So in the city of South Miami, by the way, the Related Group is replacing some 50 townhouses owned by the county. and it's going to be replaced with some beautiful apartments. They're going to be starting in January. A lot of community input right across the street over there. We're very delighted, and very delighted.
And that's what I was talking about: revitalizing and changing what you have today. If you're changing what exists into something that is consistent with the neighborhood and in a way that improves it, essentially, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Is, for example, one of the towers, and I went to a meeting for this about a couple of weeks ago on a Gables Residence Tower that is going in front of the GABA project that is just across from the courthouse, the Coral Gables courthouse, and that will be a massive 17-story tower, okay, a 16-story tower, where today is we have the maximum building is about 7 stories. The developer said during that meeting is that the Coral Gables courthouse can go up to 16 stories, okay, and therefore if that's okay, why is this tower not okay? And my attitude is, look, if Harvey Rubin and which is the clerk of courts and Mayor Calva want to build that, we'll all show up in front of her and complain about it, right? But you can't just not say, oh, because they can do it, then I can do it. The neighborhood has to be consistent with what they're bringing in. There's already, and part of the problem with this is that and this project is emblematic of that, is that they increase the density of all these places, and then they go in and ask for 3 times whatever they can get. And that's the biggest issue. That's continues to be an insidious problem with all this development. It is too big, too large for the neighborhood, and not in any way, shape, or form consistent with the problem. But the good government should be, let's defend the rights of the residents. Let's accept the investment. Nothing wrong with that. But it has to be done in a way that the residents can absorb, and the city can absorb this growth in a way that makes sense. And all these tall buildings because they have friends.
Let's chat a little bit about neighborhood associations. Are there groups of neighborhoods that have representation, like East Gables, West Gables,
Absolutely.
Little Gables?
So one of the wonderful things is Suka Orleski, who was the head of for a while was the head of the Riviera Neighborhoods Association. And there were others that were part of that group. Now that has become the Gables Neighborhoods Association. Okay, so it's been a broader process that essentially encompasses the entire city. And it's a group of activists who are doing exactly the same work that you can reference to, which is to keep the city honest about some of this development that's going on.
I would like to invite him to come on. We have 3 minutes left, so feel free to call us at community newspapers.
Leo Kellner and she has been here before. So look, the sense is it's once again it's this new revitalized group of engagement, but there are other associations with different groups that have come in together. So Gables Good Government, which is the folks that are looking at the Wawa project and everything that came into place, has propped up the folks across the street from the courthouse. Those also have created a new group. So it's an organic grassroots process that's going on in the Gables, and I think it's good. It brings new blood into the city.
We like to help groups like that, people that are active, that need to participate, want other people to participate. Right. So we welcome an opportunity to talk with them and bring them on, and so they can communicate their issues, because we understand South Miami North is different than the South Miami, or different than in the city of Miami, which there's many groups over there. So Javier Banos, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. Continued success to you. And again,
thank you very much.
And Howard's producing the show, and we are out of here. Thanks for joining us again. This is Live with the Miami Community News. Have a great day.
Take care.